Hey, welcome to the Contrarians tonight. And today we've got like a tag team episode. This is kind of out of the box for the Contrarians, but we've got two people, well, two special people that have a contrarian view, but then we have me and Martin with the basically what would you call it? The
consensus, I suppose.
The consensus.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the Doors. Let me give a brief intro, and then we're going to turn it over to Marco, and then we'll go over to Todd. But the Doors, they don't need that much of an introduction. They were formed in 1965. Jim Morrison, Ray Manzarek, Robbie Krieger, and John Densmore. I mean, they're iconic. I mean, they were kind of like forgotten in the 70s to some degree, but in the 80s, everything came around. They took their name from the Doors of Perception book from Aldous Huxley. It was a reference in a quote by William Blake, but I mean, you think about Jim Morrison, he's all cerebral and all about words. But the Doors released 5 albums they released 6 albums within 5 years. Think about this. All the bands in the 60s, all they did was just crank records out. Whether or not they had a record that was like considered a classic, that's pretty much by chance. But you have to admit, 6 albums in 5 years, that's something. So their self-titled album came out in 67. It was recorded, I believe, in August of 66. So if you think about it and you listen to that first album, it's kind of groundbreaking, to be honest. They put out 2 albums in 67. Of course, the first self-titled album in Strange Days and LA Woman in 71, which those 3 are considered to be their classic records. By 1972, the Doors had sold over 4 million records domestically and nearly 8 million singles. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. I mean, that's some great numbers. Think about it. In the 60s, that's what they did. Morrison died in 71, and the remaining Doors continued until 73. I mean, after LA Woman, they put out 2 records that, it really didn't do anything. Are they bad records? No, they're fine records. You've got Ray singing the vocals on it. Not bad records by any means. But they are considered one of the most successful bands during that time. And by 72, like I said, they sold over 4 million albums domestically and 8 million singles. What can I say? We're just going to go. Well, let's turn it over to Marco first, because even though he's not the most contrarian on this topic, Todd, I know all about Todd. But let's talk to Marco a bit, and then Martin and I will, we'll be on hand. We'll take a listen, and we'll give our 2 thoughts at the end. So, Marco, take it away.
Thanks, Grant. And I have to say this is oddly refreshing to not have to host a show.
Well, I told you, Marco, if you need someone to fill in, I'm your guy.
And you're on top of it, Grant. You're doing a great job, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
But yeah, I do want to qualify by saying that I am a Doors fan. And when we did our special episode where we talked about the bands you're likely not to see on the Contrarians, we actually talked about why you wouldn't see the Doors. And at that time, if any of what I had said in that video came across as me being negative towards the other albums, I misrepresented myself a bit. I think I was maybe nitpicking certain things. Maybe some albums were a little bit too bluesy for me, for the kind of Doors I like. And I'll talk about that when I talk about Strange Days, because I really am a big Doors fan. And I do like a lot of the albums. I had the Doors box set. So I am a big fan. Even the Soft Parade, which Todd's going to talk about later, I like. So I do want to qualify by saying that I am a big Doors fan, and I don't mean to, be harsh towards any of the other albums. But on that note about the special episode we did, I wasn't aware for up until after we did that episode that Strange Days wasn't considered like one of the best, or if not like the best Doors album. And when I had done even just a little bit of research leading up to this, I didn't do a lot of research in terms of where it ranks and things like this. But I did see most often it usually was the first album, or LA Woman, or LA Woman second. And I think even I saw one where Strange Days came in at number 4. So it wasn't close to the top. I was always under the impression that Strange Days, along with the first album, were the 1 and 2, or 1A and 1B kind of thing. So I was surprised to hear about that. Now, I also want to qualify by the fact that I'm very strong for both albums. I'm going to talk why I like Strange Days, talk about why I like Strange Days, and what I like about even the first album, and why I rank them pretty much neck and neck in terms of rating. But I just slightly, on a subjective level, I guess, favor Strange Days a little bit more. On top of the fact, Strange Days was my first Doors album, so I'm probably a little nostalgic too. But, Break On Through was the first Doors song I think I heard on VH1, and it was the music video where it showed all the scenes from the film. I saw the film before I had any of the albums, so Strange Days wasn't necessarily my introduction to the Doors, but it was the first album that I bought. So I do rate them both pretty similarly. I do favor Strange Days a little bit. On a small scale, so just off the bat, conceptually, the title along with the album cover conceptually works. You don't really see that on some of the other, you do like Morrison Hotel and stuff like this, but just in a cool way. I think the front cover is cool, and it encompasses the strange days. You're just walking down the street and you see a circus, like that's cool. It's kind of conceptual a little bit. Both albums have a real great blend of musical genres of rock, psych, and blues, which I really like. And I like the way that the band handles the different genres in their own way. So for example, I like when the Doors do something bluesy like Love Me Two Times in a way that the Doors does the blues. It's not a conventional blues song, but it's quite bluesy. And I'm not a huge fan of, I guess, like generic sounding kind of blues songs that are just like dun dun dun, like I came home this morning, like things like that.
Like traditional stuff. I get it. Yeah.
I can be a fan of that stuff, but I think when some bands do it doesn't emotionally grab me as much as when the Doors does something bluesy in their own way, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because they do it in a unique way. And Love Me Two Times is an iconic Doors song with an excellent performance by Jim Morrison, vocal performance. Same with the psychedelic parts of the album too, right? Like for example, I'm not a big fan of the first couple of Alice Cooper albums. I find them interesting, but I have a hard time listening and getting through those albums. But when the Doors does psych stuff, and they do it in their own way, like for example, on Unhappy Girl on Strange Days, which has a psychedelic tones to it. It has an endearing hook in the melody. I find it quite enjoyable to listen to. I like the way, even on that one, the way the guitar and the keyboards are existing in their own area in the mix, but they're also complementing each other. So I like the way the Doors do their own style of psych. I like the way they do their own style of blues. And I think they do that successfully, especially on the first 2 albums. The track listing, I think, is phenomenal and works for single sitting listening sessions. I also think the same thing about the first album. Where I'm kind of nitpicking, I guess, with the first album is I think Strange Days is produced a little bit better. It just, to my ears, sounds a little bit clearer or better, where the first album has some, I guess, 60s type tropes. Not even tropes, but just the production in terms of some vocal stuff. And that's only when I'm listening to them both back to back and trying to nitpick and trying to say why I like this one better than the other one. But back to the track listing. Moonlight Drive, visually, like lyrically, is exciting. For someone like me who can visualize, like literally can see images in my mind, when I listen to that song, it has a great effect on me because I can picture things. People Are Strange is absolutely iconic, probably one of the most iconic Doors song, other than maybe Break On Through and Light My Fire. I've seen people walk around with the lyric to that on their shirt. Like, that's how iconic it is. But it's an offbeat tune, but it's appealing. And it works in the sense of the flow of this album. And I like how the Doors, in general, can sequence an album in a way that shows a variation in terms of their songwriting styles, yet they don't necessarily need to rely on doing like a ballad. But they have a way of sequencing their albums with offbeat type tunes like People Are Strange, and they don't have to rely on doing the ballad thing, and it works. So that's another reason why I like Strange Days. I Can't See Your Face is so different from everything else on the album, yet it's groovy and it fits in at the same time. I Like I said, I do think Strange Days is produced a little bit better. There's things, if I'm nitpicking stuff, and I love the tunes and the track listing off the first album, and I think the performances are just as good. Some of the songs off the first album that aren't overplayed, I like a lot. For example, 20th Century Fox is a great tune. I Looked at You is a great tune. And those are the not even overplayed tunes. And you can find gems on even the first album, and pretty much all the albums have hidden gems like that. If anything, Break On Through, and I guess you could argue the same thing about People Are Strange, is maybe a little overplayed. Light My Fire, and again, who am I to criticize art and musicianship? I'm not a musician. If I have one criticism, and I love Light My Fire, and I've listened to it a bunch, I personally think at this point, to go and listen to a song I've heard that many times, I think it's a little long, because I think in the middle it gets a little repetitious, where you could cut a full minute out of that tune and I'd probably like it a little bit better. Just in my opinion. And I'm literally nitpicking because I love both albums.
Well, they did cut out a minute of it on the 45.
Yeah, so but I always listen to the album version. That's why for me, it's the 6 minute and 50 second or 7 minute version of the song. But and I'm honestly just nitpicking because I love both albums. To me, and I guess this is contrarian, to me, they're 1A, 1B, but I slightly prefer Strange Days. So I guess that makes me contrarian, which I didn't even realize until recently.
Well, it would make you contrarian because, well, we'll get to that later.
But I hope I kind of covered why I like the album, and I kind of hope that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. But don't forget, when they recorded the first album in, what was it, August of 66, they were a newly signed band. They had no money, and they probably threw more money on Strange Days. I'm just saying, I can't prove this, but of course Strange Days is going to be a little bit more adventurous, a little bit more creative. I mean, think about it. It was 1967. They probably threw more money at it. I'm just saying.
I think you can hear that. I think you can hear you're probably right that they did have more funding for this album in terms of the first. And I think you can actually hear it in the mix, at least to my ears, to when I'm listening to
that's fair.
Back.
Yeah.
So that's fair. Strange Days for me.
All right. So everyone, we've heard from Marco. Strange Days is his choice. Now I'd like to turn it over to, okay, we know Marco has a contrarian choice. And a lot of people probably can't really argue with, well, we can't argue with it. We're going to turn this over to Todd. Now, Todd has a very contrarian choice. So everybody brace yourselves. Make sure you're buckled up because this may break the internet. So Todd, why don't you give us your spiel and then we'll come back around and we'll just kind of...
Okay. All right. Well, my experience with the Doors, I want to say as well that I like all of the Doors albums very, very much. With the exception of LA Woman. I think LA Woman has to be really, really great songs and then a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, my exposure to the Doors was when I was 15, and it was the compilation 13. And so the Saw Parade was the second Doors album that I ever bought. And so the Saw Parade, recorded after a long tour. Morrison's drinking was becoming more and more of a problem. He was unreliable. Sessions would drag on. The costs would pile up. Despite all of this, they came together. Krieger kind of stepped up with the songwriting and helped because Jim was less and less involved with the songwriting as time went on. Although he does have, I think, 3 or 4 credits on the Saw Parade, 1969. But in my opinion, the strength of the Saw Parade is in the sequencing because it starts one way and ends one very, very different other way. So, and that's why it appeals to me so much. So we'll start at the beginning. Okay. So tell all the people, you got crooner Jim crooning like an adult contemporary singer. And it's got the orchestration that, probably people expected that to be on the first album. You'd think the record company would be trying to make them, accessible on their debut. But but the really thick orchestration, Until All the People. It's the first song with individual writing credits for the Doors, because apparently Jim had an issue with the lyrics, and so that's why the songs are credited to different members. I guess Jim had an issue with the lyric, "Can't you see me growing? Get your guns," which is interesting because there's a reference to guns in the Soft Parade title track, which Morrison wrote. But "Touch Me," I think, is probably the Doors' best song. I think you could, well, I saw the first time I heard "Touch Me," I was 5 years old. I saw it on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. And I don't know why my parents let me watch that. I think they didn't really understand what it was. But and on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour as a 5-year-old, I thought, and I mentioned this on Grant's show, and I got a response out of it. I thought they were kind of spooky. I thought, Jim Morrison was tall and kind of foreboding and kind of creepy looking. And if you've ever seen that video, there's a part where he says, all of the playing stops, and he says he's supposed to be saying, "Come on, come on, come on, come on," but he doesn't say that. He doesn't say anything. So he's holding the mic in one hand, and he's got, for some reason, a maraca in the same hand. And instead of saying, "Come on, come on, come on," all the band stops playing, and it's just silence. And you could kind of hear the microphone and moving in his hand. And then he just says, "Touch me," and it's unsettling. It's entertaining to watch, but I don't know whether he made a mistake or whether he did that on purpose, but or if he just liked the silence. That might have been what it was. But anyway, that was my impression. And John Densmore actually agrees with that. And I'll talk about that more when we get to Wild Child, because that's the other song that they did on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. But the orchestral and horn arrangements were suggested by the producer, Paul A. Rothschild. And Densmore and Manzarek were fully on board because they had been wanting to try that. And Jim wasn't opposed, but he didn't really participate in that part of it. They always wanted to try jazz. Densmore has said in interviews that there would be no LA Woman without the Soft Parade, because it was something that they wanted to do and wanted to try. Touch Me was influenced by John Coltrane's work, apparently. Has a great saxophone solo by a guy named Curtis Amy, who also plays on Carole King's Tapestry, and also with Marvin Gaye and Smokey Robinson. I think one could argue that the Soft Parade is the best album based on the strength of Touch Me alone. I mean, it rocks, but it also swings. It's aggressive, but also is somehow accessible. So yeah, Touch Me, any album that's on, I think is going to be elevated. Shaman's Blues is pretty cool. It's bluesy, but it kind of what Marco was saying. It kind of swings at the same time, and most blues songs don't really swing like Shaman's Blues does. I think it's one of the best Doors tracks. I think it's one of their best blues-oriented tracks. Do It and Easy Ride. If you were going to say there was something weak about the Soft Parade, that would probably be the place. Do It is just kind of a jam. It's really almost not even a song. It doesn't have much structure. And the lyrics seem to be a short poem, which basically goes, "Please, please listen to me, children. You are the ones who will rule the world." And then for some reason, he starts saying, "You got to please me all night long," which doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the lyrics. And it's a little unsettling. But the part about the children being the ones that rule the world is the only part that's actually written on the sleeve. So that might have been an improvisation. And Easy Ride's kind of a bouncy, light way to end the song, but the side one of the album. But again, that's kind of, I think that's probably the weak part of the album. Now, Wild Child, I think, is great. Densmore's drumming is just off the charts, fantastic on that song. We were on a different, we were having a chat online with a couple of us, and Peter Jones, one of the Contrarians Patreons, was saying that Manzarek might be the MVP of the Doors, but Densmore is their secret weapon. And I thought that was really cool. And coming from a drummer, I think that's great. Wild Child, again, is another song that sort of swings a little bit. They did this on the Smartest Brothers Comedy Hour, and John Densmore said that when Jim sang the lyric "staring into the hollow idol's eye," that he scared the audience. He was asked if the audience was what their reaction was. And he said, "Well, they were attentive, but I think we spooked them." So I thought that was an interesting take on it. And it ends on a super weird note. Jim Morrison saying, "Remember when we were in Africa?" for no apparent reason. I'm sure it meant something to him. Running Blue, I think, is really cool as well. This is Robbie's song, and he sings the chorus and another horn arrangement. It's country and western and bluegrass, but also R&B at the same time, which I think is really cool. And it's got a reference to Otis Redding's death, which had apparently just happened, where he sings the lyric, "Poor Otis dead and gone." Critics either loved this song or they hated it. Some really hated it. The Rolling Stone critic said that one of the things that she didn't like about it was there's a lyric that goes, "Don't fight too much to lose," which totally contradicts earlier calls for revolution, like in the end and when the music's over. Wishful Sinful's really cool. But again, this record started really mainstream, and it's kind of getting weirder and weirder. And so that's kind of what I really like about it. So Wishful Sinful is another Krieger track. Mellow song, really sophisticated arrangement. One Rolling Stone critic called it Baroque pop. It's got a solo on it that I have not been able to figure out whether it's an oboe or a soprano saxophone, but it's very different, very interesting. But Soft Parade, now this is a whole other story. So if I had heard that, now I talked about being spooked when I was a kid. If I had heard that when I was back in seminary school when I was 5 years old, it would have scared the hell out of me. I'm pretty sure. But it starts with this preacher thing that Jim Morrison is doing, like kind of goes back to his Southern roots, kind of him playing a preacher. It goes back to there being a long song to end a Doors album, which I think is really cool. It was written by Morrison, but really Paul Rothchild did a lot of the work because he basically took a bunch of Morrison's poetry and kind of put it together in a way that makes sense, but does it really make sense? I'm not quite sure. It has acid rock in it, and I saw one article that said they referred to it as sunshine pop, and I assume when they say that they're talking about peppermint miniskirts chocolate candy. When I heard that, I thought that was disco. I thought, has the Doors invented disco 7 years early? But apparently that's sunshine pop, which also kind of makes sense, I guess. There's that whole part where he says the monk bought lunch, and then he says, "This is the best part of the trip. This is the trip. The best part." I really like what he say. When I was 16, I thought that was hilarious. And then it transitions into this like acid rock jam that has something to do with animals and people going out in the wilderness and having a good time. But this is the best thing about this album. This is my very favorite part. It starts with Jim crooning "Tell All the People That You See" with an orchestra, and it ends with Jim saying, "When all else fails, we can whip the horse's eyes and make them sleep and cry." And you're like, what is that? So that made an impression on me when I was a kid. And I thought, okay, well, here's an album that starts out really accessible. Like they're trying to make the Doors kind of syrupy and radio friendly. And then it ends with this crazy, almost nightmare of a song. And so that's why it's my favorite.
Holy mackerel. Well, what can I say? But you did mention one thing before I turn it over to Martin.
Okay.
You did mention that the sequencing on this record was strong. Now, I'm going to have to disagree with you on that because anybody in their right mind would not start out a record with "Tell All the People." And we talked about this on my show when me and Reed were there. "Touch Me" should have led off this whole album.
I agree that "Touch Me" stronger. And remember, "Touch Me" came out as a single before the record came out. I agree that it's stronger, but "Tell All the People" is so out of place that it challenges people.
Okay.
And kind of says, okay, well, you thought you knew what you're going to get. How about this? Let's start with this, and then and then you get Touch Me, and it's interesting too to think that I think a lot of people assume that the band succumbed to record company pressure to do the orchestrations, and that wasn't it at all. It was Rothschild had the idea, and Densmore and Manzarek were kind of like, hey, that's cool. We sort of wanted to try that. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a common misconception is that people think that, it was something the record company wanted them to do, to sell adult contemporary records, I guess. But could be. Not so, really.
I just can't imagine opening up this album with Tell All the People.
Now, when I said
we were talking about this before, but I still can't. I'm just saying.
The sequencing is flawed because, like I said, Do It and Easy Ride sort of don't fit, and Do It's barely even there. But it's flawed. But I think that overall, it's strong, and that it starts out super conventional and then gets weirder and weirder and weirder until it's super weird at the end.
Okay, that's fair enough. Martin, I'm going to turn it over to you. What do you think about what Marco and Todd have to say?
Yeah, I mean, to react to this Tell All the People thing, I mean, when I was going through these albums again, and today I went through and played every song again, right? And to me, it reminds me of 60s variety music, and also that and other songs on here remind me of Tom Jones. It reminds me of that, boom, pop, hey, that whole thing with the brass going off all over the place. It's a little bit of that up-tempo crooner, easy listening thing that you were getting. So yeah, it was very out of place. And the last crack I want to make is that I think with the Soft Parade, the song itself is quite a disaster. And it's almost like Jim was warning us with the end, which is awesome. It's like, this is the end of the good long songs. And then when the music's over, it was way worse than the end. And it's like, the music has been over twice now. And then we're moving on to the Soft Parade. So he warned us twice. Don't listen to the Soft Parade.
In a strange kind of way, I don't disagree. I think it is a mess.
But I think the Soft Parade was like the last hurrah, because they never did anything
right
since the Soft Parade. I mean, as far as the epics go, I like when the music's over, and I like the end. And when on my show when we did it, Touch Me and Soft Parade were my two favorite tracks on this record.
Right.
The rest of it,
the recording's good, and I love that disco comment too, because you definitely notice the disco in there too. But another thing I want to say is, with you being in the contrarian seat here, I thought you were going to pick one of these and then say,
no.
And then there was a Doors revival in the 80s, and I found out they had another lead singer, this crazy pretentious poet guy was in the band as well. And I hate those albums. No, give me other voices any day, right?
Oh my God, now that is a contrarian choice.
Yeah, that would have been very contrarian, right? You had two more places to go that would have been much more contrarian than Soft Parade.
Well, we're just kind of looking at the Jim Morrison.
I know. But I wanted to show a couple of quick things that I had tucked in my albums here. When I did a big trade with Steve Rhodes, and this is kind of cool. This is a No One Gets Out of Here Alive invite to the whiskey for the Danny Sugarman book in 1981. That's kind of cool. Wow. And then we've got a piece on Doors Letterhead, which is this is about Robbie Krieger. Yeah, Doors guitarist Robbie Krieger has just completed the original score for the Whoopi Goldberg Rutger Hauer production of Who Are They, an hour-long documentary on the homeless. Wow. So that's what that one is. But and the last cool thing I had tucked in was this bad boy here. This is the the big Waiting for the Sun poster.
Holy crap.
Which I thought I didn't go look because I'm lazy, but I looked on Discogs and thought, did this come in the album? And it's like, I didn't look, but then I realized that it's too big to fit in the album. It would stick out. What side are we on there? So I don't think it came with the album, but that's kind of cool too. So anyways, I went through all these records again, and I want to say a couple things about the Doors in general. It's like, they remind me of the Tragically Hip. in that great lyricist, great singer, great frontman. I don't care about whatever else goes on. I mean, all the value in this band, 68 to 72% of the value in this band for me is all in Jim Morrison. I love his lyrics. I love his singing, but there's an original 1971. This is the paperback, but I think it came out in hardcover. But when they had that big Doors revival in the 80s, or in the early 80s, 1981, I was in university there. That was second year university. It was a big deal. Jim Morrison was on the cover of Rolling Stone, and the Doors were super hot again. American Prayer came out. All those records started selling like crazy again. I loved it, but I would almost rather read the Doors than listen to them. And like I knew all these albums top to bottom. I played them a lot. I worshiped them for years and years and years. But playing them again today, it's like I almost feel like we love music so much, all of us. This is kind of an interesting discussion I've had with a few people. We all love music so much, but we have to allow ourselves to say that there's some bands that we don't have to love to death. And the Doors, I feel that way a little bit about all of them, right? Or all the albums as an aggregate. And as I went through them, and I actually looked at a couple other video shows as well, people say that this is a hard catalog to rank because they all have their merits and they all have their weak spots. And the personalities of them are not that incredibly different. You do have Soft Parade, which I liken to the last Nick Drake album. When he went all floral kind of thing, right? For one record, right? But Morrison Hotel and LA Woman would probably be my least favorite because I just find there's just way too much of that Chuglin blues on it kind of thing. I don't want to hear them do blues, and I certainly don't want to hear them cover blues. Because I want to hear Jim Morrison's poetry, right? It ticks me off when people are really snobby about, oh, that guy thinks he's a poet and all this. It's a little bit like the whole Neil Peart thing. When people put down Neil Peart, it's like, what's wrong with once in a while having a lyricist who tries super, super, super hard, right? Rather than just says, I'm too cool to say anything too deep, right? I don't want to sound pretentious. So he's fearless, right? And Neil Peart is fearless as well to go in there and try to be really, really deep. And I think he totally succeeds. I mean, I think his lyrics are awesome. And I get ticked off when people put him down, from a snobby thing and say, oh, he thinks he's an intellectual. How can he be an intellectual? He's clearly drunk, right? That whole thing, right? So anyways, that's kind of okay. One last general thing is that I noticed. Sorry, Grant, go ahead.
No. I know what you have one last general thing, but we've got Marco who thinks that Strange Days is as opposed to Todd who thinks Soft Parade. What's your thoughts on Strange Days?
Yeah, I would put Strange Days and Waiting for the Sun roughly in the same category, and I'd almost put them in the same category as the first one. So I put Morrison Hotel and LA Woman together. I put Soft Parade off to the side, and I put those three together. But the first one has an extra little bit of magic. Strange Days is a little bit of their Van Halen too. I think it's a little bit of that whole, when you hear those rock stars give that cliche of, we had our whole lives to come up with our first album and 6 months to come up with our second one and all that kind of stuff, right? I mean, not really, because I do really like it a lot. I mean, I definitely like this one a lot as well. I certainly think this is a really good album. But okay, so getting to the first one, what I like about it the most, a couple of things. First off, it is so innovative for 66 into January 67. It's Psych before there's any Psych, and then nobody ever tried to make Psych quite this way moving forward. I mean, they just stood alone, stood aside. They had a really, really weird sound. But getting back to the idea that we're allowed, as music nerds who like way too much music, we're allowed to say, just because it's different doesn't mean it's great. So there's a weirdness to it, and there's an ugliness to what the Doors do, definitely. But what I like about that first album a lot. So first is the absolute uniqueness of what they were doing, and so early, and so psych and so early. There's no garage on here, right? I mean, this is literally, we're supposed to be in the last vestiges of the garage era. There's no garage on here. But what I like about this album is, really, outside of Backdoor Man, which to me is a throwaway because it's a cover, there's no blues on here. I don't want to hear the Doors doing blues. You hear the jazziness, and you definitely hear psych, and there's a lot of organ. But I don't think you really hear blues on here. You hear lounge music, and it's creepy, and there's some slow, quiet stuff. I think Break On Through is a great, it's a hard hitting opener, but later the Doors would have hard hitting songs that are rote blues. But this is not a rote blues. It's very interesting. It's got that jazziness. It's almost like the Doors skipped garage and they were picking up influences from the Beats. And it's like the Beats, no surf, no Beatles, no garage, the Beats straight into inventing psych, being basically one of the first bands on the ground with psych. And then they had this wild man lyricist on top of it, where no one was even remotely as not conservative as Jim Morrison, as in terms of psych lyricists. He was way out there, right? But yeah, Soul Kitchen, a little bit of blues in there, but it's a real acid sort of blues. Crystal Ship is really cool, like mellow, again, creepy. I love Alabama's song, the oompa music thing, like that breaks up things, and it's just sort of hypnotic vocal on it. I Looked at You and End of the Night are good kind of mellow ones. I mean, I Looked at You, it feels a little soul music, I suppose, in there as well. And then Take It As It Comes, again, creepy garage horror movie sort of feel to it, and that is really interesting. And then the end, I think, is just really cool. It's got that cool raga vibe, and it's long, and it's epic, and it's a super famous song. And like I say, I think I was a little bit disappointed going back to When the Music's Over, and I was horrified listening to Soft Soft Parade, right? The last track, the other long one, right? But yeah. So and in terms of the production, Marco made some really good points on the production, but I find that the instruments sit together better here. That it's in a more compressed range. It's definitely in a more obviously compressed range in that there's less lows and less highs, but everything kind of melds a little together. There's this sort of movement of, or not movement, but there's a distortion that kind of melds everything together. It sounds like it's recorded a little hot, and it's a little mid-rangey, whereas it gets a little more conventional on the next album. And the best sounding album really is Soft Parade, I think. But yeah, so for those reasons, for the fact that it is so groundbreaking and innovative, and it came from nowhere and nobody ever copied them, put it that way. And I think it's certainly got less blues on it than the last two albums. I really find a lot not to like on the last two albums. I really do like Riders on the Storm. And there's some good mellow stuff in there. Indian Summer on Morrison Hotel is cool because that raga thing comes back. But yeah, it just feels like the coolest, most urgent, most vital, most badass Doors album out of all of them. So that's why it's my choice. But again, I do have to say that I did see, like Marco mentioned, I did see some other choices around. It's not very unanimous that it's really the first Doors album that is the best one. Actually, yeah, the last general thing I wanted to say that I forgot is that I really felt that the only band they have some kinship with, as I was playing all this stuff again today, a lot of it sounds like the Grateful Dead. Tons and tons and tons of Grateful Dead all over these Doors albums, except for the profusion of organ. But other than that, just all the different places they go, I just hear a lot of Grateful Dead in this stuff, especially on the later albums, when it is a little more infused with tradition. So there you go, Doors 1.
Yeah, I don't hear so much Grateful Dead like on the first album.
No.
But, like Todd said, he thought that the sequencing on Soft Parade was really good. I don't think that the songwriting on Soft Parade, I don't think it's anywhere near the first album. Like I said, you have all this time to record your first album and write it. But the sequencing on the first Doors album, opening up with Break On Through, ending side one with Light My Fire,
yeah,
and starting with Backdoor Man and ending with The End, the sequencing on this record is perfect. I think Light My Fire is one of the greatest singles of the 60s. That and 8 Miles High by the Byrds. Both of those, I think, are top notch. Now, I don't think that Soft Parade even comes anywhere close. I know Todd likes, because Todd's out there.
I do want to say, though, that they were clearly unprepared. They came into the studio. Not only did they not have anything, but they weren't even in the right frame of mind. They were exhausted. They weren't even in the right frame of mind.
Well, don't
so
forget,
the fact that
Todd,
they came out with this weird thing is kind of cool.
Well, don't forget, Todd, they had all this material for the first album. They had all this material for the second album. By the time you got to Waiting for the Sun, they had no material. They've been writing material in the studio ever since. So this is why I think, to me, Strange Days is almost as good as the first album. Almost. The thing with the first album, it's got a lot more space around the instruments. Like Martin said, I think the production on Strange Days is a little bit more dense. Now, whether that's good or bad, I'm not here to judge, but I do like the spaciousness. Say that real fast. Spaciousness, if that's even a word, on the first album. I don't know where I was going with that, Todd, but I'm going to revert it back to you.
Hey, hang on. Do you guys notice the Tom Jones in Light My Fire too? Is there a little bit of Tom Jones in that? Yeah.
It could be. Maybe Jim liked Tom Jones. I don't know. Who knows?
Well, I think Jim was a completely unique. He had a completely unique stage presence. There just wasn't anybody like him. He was, he had a way to just kind of stare at the crowd and stare at people, and his delivery was, like I said, a little bit spooky and could be really fierce too. He could croon one moment and go and get really fierce, like turn on a dime. And so that's one of the things that's great about him, and he does that a lot on Soft Parade.
Think about this, though. You saw the footage from the Ed Sullivan Show where they're doing Light My Fire.
Yeah.
If Jim Morrison isn't controlling the whole, I don't even know what to put on it. How charismatic and how commanding is he of that whole, for the one thing, they told him not to sing, Baby, We Can't Get Much Higher. He just did what he did. It's just
I love what you say about his singing too, because that reminds me. We were talking with Pete the other day about, Mick Jagger, and people say he's not a great singer, and then I said, well, he's got two gears, right? Yeah. And when he's shouting, he's not a great singer, but when he's quiet, he's a great singer. Jim Morrison also has two gears. I love that vocal fry, powerful version, but Jim Morrison is actually a great singer when he's doing that and the quiet stuff.
Yeah. It's kind of like Paul Stanley. If Paul Stanley's screaming, it's not good.
Paul Stanley's got two gears live.
He's got two gears too. If anybody's listening to on the soundboard, I'm sorry to jump track. If anybody's listening to on the soundboard recordings, good Lord Almighty, don't scream, Paul. Don't scream. Just saying, throwing it out there. Don't scream.
Well, and I kind of put, and this might be a tangent, but I kind of put John Anderson on that list too. Everybody thinks of him as a very sweet singer, but he's also got some grit. He's got some swagger, and that's one of the problems with replacing somebody like him is you got to have somebody who can do both things. I don't think the Doors could have ever replaced Jim.
No, it's pretty interesting. I was trying to think of other bands, other bands obviously replaced their lead singers, but can you guys think of any other examples where a band just says, oh, the singer's gone, we're just carrying on without the singer?
Yeah.
Nobody else ever do that.
Well,
Genesis sort of, but they already had a guy who could sing.
Did Bronco? I know there's a really obscure band, but when Jess Roden left Bronco, didn't they carry on without him? But did they replace him on the third album?
Yeah. No idea.
There's a third Bronco album that I've never heard, and I don't know I think just one of the guitarists. I know Mick Abrams left Jethro Tull and sang.
Yeah, but Mick Abrams didn't sing in Jethro Tull.
No,
Genesis is an interesting case because they didn't replace Peter Gabriel, but they just brought in a guy who wasn't doing the singing before. But
the move.
After did they do that?
Yeah, Carl Wayne.
Yeah, but don't forget, Roy Wood was doing a lot of singing.
He was, but they had a lead singer. That was his thing. He was the vocalist, and then he left, and Roy Wood just kept and continued to sing.
Yeah, but
and then
Roy
him and Jeff Lynne traded off leads, but he was the lead vocalist who left, but they continued on without him.
Okay, I'll give you that.
And they didn't replace him, so
I'll give you that.
See, Alice in Chains could have done that, but they didn't. Right? They did replace Lane, but they could have just gone on with Jerry Cantrell, right? But yeah, I'm wondering if there's any 4-piece bands that just said, okay, we're now a trio. Let's move on, and you start singing.
This sounds like an episode for an upcoming show to me.
Yeah.
History in 5 songs. Yeah.
I can't think of anybody, Martin, to be quite honest, off the top of my head.
Can I give my thought on Soft Parade before we wrap up?
Marco, whoever you are. Go ahead.
I did, when we talked about this and I heard Todd was picking Soft Parade, I kind of felt like going into it that I could go in and say, okay, yeah, like I know Soft Parade, like it's got a few good songs and then it kind of trails off or whatever. But I was surprised when I went and listened to it a couple times this week that I did like most of the songs. What I like about the last song, the Soft Parade, is I do find that it's really disjointed for a lot of it, but I think it's really cool when he says, okay, now here's the best part. And then they deliver the best part. Like, that's cool. Because I think the best part of the song is that part.
That's good.
The thing about the sound of Soft Parade is because of all that extra stuff, like the horns and the saxophone, like you had mentioned, it almost sounds unlike the Doors as a unit. And if you had just called that a Jim Morrison solo album, that would have worked. Like, I would have totally believed that, because it sounds more like something he would have done if he left and tried to do his own thing because of all those extra instrumentation.
And there's somebody on YouTube.
But I like Soft Parade.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's somebody on YouTube that did a version of Touch Me without the they took the strings and the horns out, and which I think is, I don't see the point in that, but it's still pretty good. So if you want to look that up on YouTube, yeah, it still works. I don't think it's as good, but it still works. And I want to say as well, I think it's funny it's great what Marco said about when he says this is the best part, and then the best part comes. It's not only that, but he says it in a way like he's giddy, like he doesn't even know how to say it. He's like, this is the best part, the part I really like. And it seems really sincere. But I would really have a hard, my top 3 are definitely the first album and Strange Days and Soft Parade. So yeah, I can't tear apart an opinion that either one of those is the best one. I really can't. I just like mine more.
Well, that's what this show's all about. Everybody giving their thoughts, and we have a general discussion about it. That's all that matters. Now, whether or not we've changed people's minds, I can't say that. But obviously, the first Doors album is the best, and Marco and Todd are totally wrong. Martin and I are right. That's what I've got out of it. But I appreciate you guys coming up to bat. That's all I'm going to say.
Cool.
No, actually, it's all good. For anybody watching this, if you haven't checked out any Doors stuff, all the Doors albums are worth checking out. They really haven't. They never put out a bad record. I would, go out and check it out. That's what we're all about. Go out and listen to some music and check it out. That's it.
All right. Sounds good.
I don't know.
Marco, are you Are you the wrap-up guy as usual at this
Or do you want me to wrap it up?
I was going to
Marco?
let Grant wrap it up.
All right.
Yeah.
So I'll wrap this up. Welcome to the Contrarians. We're signing off. Thanks for everybody to tune in. Please like, subscribe, hit that bell, and we've got merch down below. Check it out and subscribe. What can I say? This is the only channel that matters.
Very nice.
Just saying.
I would have said that, but thanks, Grant. That was awesome. Thanks,
Well,
everyone.
come on. Everybody else is, come on. This is where you need to go. So, but I appreciate everyone here tonight. I appreciate Marco, Martin, and Todd. Thanks for coming on and talking the Doors.
Sounds good, man.
Hopefully we've turned on some people. That's all I'm going to say.
All right. Take care.
Good night.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.